I want to tell you a little story. There's a famous lecturer in America called Robert Zander. So he walks into an auditorium, there's 500 people in the auditorium, and he looks at them and everyone's looking at him as to say, well, what's the first session going to be like? Robert looks at the audience and says, every single person in this room is going to get an A-star this year. And he has a little bit of silence, of course. Everyone's thinking, how what are we going to do? Robert says to them, all you need to do is write a really detailed letter to yourself and myself, detailing exactly what you're going to do in order to achieve this A-star. If the letter's of a required standard, I can guarantee that no matter what you do, you will get an A-star. So ultimately what that does, and I write a Zander letter to myself every single year, and I know a few other people in the club do that as well. Ultimately what that does is it means that you are very, very specific in your targets and your goals, okay? You're almost telling yourself and you're writing it as though it's happened, and those specifics, requirements of that letter mean that subconsciously you're going to start to infiltrate that into your life. So I would encourage you all to write a Zander letter to yourself. I write in November every single year. I don't read it till New Year's Eve, okay? And you'll be amazed at how much of that letter has come into fruition because you planted it in your subconscious at an early stage. So whatever we decide your target is today, write a letter to yourself. Act as if, I always say. So if you're going to be a business owner or you're going to be a videographer, act as if it's already happened, and write a letter being super, super specific about what you want to achieve in 2024. Any questions on that, Tom? No?
Yeah, how do you deal with the expectation of, like, obviously you've done it, you've come from football, how do you deal with everyone else's expectation of knowing what they think you should do to what you actually did? So like, do you ask yourself that question as well? Why don't I just go a little lower in football rather than totally switch?
Yeah, we'll talk about that later on down the line, but ultimately, they're your dreams.
Yeah.
There are going to be people that are in your life that are really important in your life that feel like you should be doing something else. But as long as you're being true to yourself and being honest to yourself, then you have to push through those barriers. And sometimes what we have to look at, Josh mentioned the anchors in question 3. An anchor can be a positive or a negative. So an anchor for me would be the fact that one of my long-term aims is to give a business to my sons. So that's one of my reasons to get up in the morning. But if you've got someone in your life that doesn't potentially believe in you, they can be a negative anchor and they can be holding you back as well. So when I walked into that office and people were looking at me like, you shouldn't be here, I'm like, well, I'll have a conversation in 10 years' time. And sometimes it's that level of confidence and arrogance, but that ultimately will drive you at some point because you know that mum, dad, brother, sister don't actually believe in your dream, and you can use those negative thoughts and you can even turn them into enemies. And it sounds with friends and family, but use that as motivation and a reason to be consistent, because I've got to prove my dad wrong. He thinks I should be doing this, he thinks I should stay with him. And ultimately, sometimes as parents, we portray those insecurities onto our children and then create limiting beliefs. So yeah, it's really important that you find fuel in those people, good and bad, in order to move forward. Great question. 5 or 6 things that I do every single year which enables me to set really long targets, whether that be a year, 2 years, 3 years or 10 years. And there's some key factors. So there's 5 or 6 points that I want you to think about and move forward with. So we talked about those massive life goals. For me, it was to get into Manchester United's first team initially. I then reflected, and then it was to own a business. But I need you to be super, super specific in exactly what they are. And those specifics can be, well, I'm going to achieve this particular thing by this date. And that adds an extra amount of pressure and accountability, which ultimately you need as motivation in order to drive consistency. So what I'd encourage you to do is have a list of your massive goals. And I want them to be as big as they can possibly be. The next thing is probably the most difficult things. You're gonna then eliminate some of those big, really big life goals if you can live without them. And if you can, then they stay on the list. All right. So if I wanted red Ferrari, but I'd be happy with a black Porsche or a Lamborghini, it comes off my list. But if I can't live without being the President of the United States, then that stays. Depends on how big your goal is. So elimination or prioritization is super important in those goals. I then want you to identify the top 5. So you might have a list of 15, but I want you to identify the top 5 goals. All right. So now you've broke down a list of 15, you might have 5 that are remaining, and I want you to then put them in order. Be specific in which order you're going to achieve them. If you're going to be, I don't know, whatever, you're going to own a business, what are the big, massive, audacious goals that come before that, the things that have to happen in order for you to get to this position? Okay, so now you've eliminated some of the goals, you've found your top 5, and now you're putting them into specific orders on how they can happen, because you can't be what you can't see, and visualization is going to be super important to you. So you have to understand what that process is going to be like, and you have to almost live in that place. So then you're able to make effective decisions along the way. I'm not going to go out drinking tonight because that isn't going to mean that get up for a run in the morning, and that means that I'm not going to get a 3.5 hour marathon in New York in 2027, if that's your goal. All right. So you're then able to make effective decisions based on your goals, which then will ultimately allow you to be consistent in your approach. I always think that on a vision board, I'm very visual. You should be looking at whose life you want to model. Now, I'm not asking you to copy anybody. I'm asking you to look at people that you see as successful or that are important to you, whether they be famous or just normal everyday people, and say, well, I like what they're doing, and pick an element of what they're really good at. I've got loads and I'll tell you about them. There's a story. So The Rock's signed for some agency. Obviously The Rock is or was a superb wrestler, and he walks into this agency that's going to get him into movies. He stands in front of a big audience of agents like this and says, I want to have Will Smith's career, but better. Now, from coming, and he was like, no disrespect because Will's signed for the same agency, but that's my dream, that's my vision. So for someone to come from wrestling to say that you want to have a bigger career in movies than Will Smith is super, super specific. All of the agents sat there, whether they believe him or not, know exactly what his dream is. So when he comes with an idea or a situation, they're saying, well, Will do this. This is what you need to do to be a little bit better than Will Smith. So ultimately, you can create people who are important to you and set yourself targets based on what they've done or what they've achieved. I think it's super important to list out who those are. So I'll tell you some of mine. One of mine is Kevin Hart. I like Kevin because, not because of the stardom and the fact that he sells out arenas, but he's got a group of friends, about 10 of them. And what he's done is, not in order for them to stay his friends, but he's built them up so that individually they have their own careers that are successful in their own right, but that benefit Kevin. So one of them might be his agent, the other one might be his manager, the other one might be his videographer, one of them is the personal trainer. So he built a network of people with the people that he's already surrounded by and empowered them in order to empower himself, which some people might say that I've potentially done wrong in terms of helping him build his marketing business, because it's ultimately going to benefit me. I'm going to end up on YouTube, Rob's going to get loads of work, but actually I want to see Rob be successful. So that's why I like Kevin Hart, and that's why he's on my board. 50 Cent is one for me. I like 50 Cent's strategic nature. I have the feeling that everything he does is with a purpose, with intent. Sometimes it's fueled by animosity or confrontation, which might not necessarily be my style. He's doing it at the moment to P. Diddy every single day. But there'll be a method to his madness, and something will come of it at the end. And the only reason he's able to be so strategic is because he knows what his long-term goal is, and he knows how he can affect that by being himself. Once you've identified who those people are and what personality traits you would like to take forward to yourself, you have to then understand the person that they are. Who did they shadow? Who's in their life that's influencing them? Who's mentoring them in order to get them into that position? What books are they reading? I do a lot of reading in books, and in every single book these 5 or 6 book references if you're listening, which will then ultimately tell you who's influenced this book that this individual's writing. And then I want you to look at their strengths and weaknesses. What are they really good at, but what are they not good at? And just take little bits of people. The next element is the visualization. I think it's super important that you, on your board, it's not always visual, it's sometimes how you want to feel, how you want people to perceive you. If I was to ask you to ask an internal question, if your friends or your family were to describe you in 5 words, how would they describe you at the moment? And how would you like them to describe you in the next couple of years? I know that for me, I would hope that everyone would say I was consistent. Probably just put on Instagram every single day. But ultimately, that was one of the words that went on one of my first vision boards. So therefore, now it's holding me accountable, because that's how I want people to perceive me, how I want to be seen. I remember vividly when I was living in Winshaw, so probably at 8 or 9. Some of my mates were doing some really stupid things and getting led off track. I really understood at that point that I don't want to be seen as a bad guy. I don't want to be the guy that gets in trouble. I want to be seen as an athlete, or someone who has a little bit of impact. I use impact all the time, and that kept me on the right path, because that's how I wanted to be perceived in the future. That's the person that I wanted to be. So I didn't let my environment control my actions, because I was held accountable to these words that I set for myself. The 4th point is, well, what do you need in order to be successful? We've talked about it before. Do you need a mentor? Do you need someone to shadow? Do you need someone to bounce ideas off? Is there someone that's working in your industry at the moment that you could see as a negative because they're already doing it? Can they actually give you some advice and tips, and maybe show you some pitfalls of what they wouldn't do if they could do it again? What skills do I need to achieve my targets? You know, what are the things that I need to do on a day-to-day basis in order to achieve it? Do I need any tools? Do I need a phone? Do I need a videographer? Do I need an audience? Do I need money to achieve my goals? And then what kind of mindset do I need to be in? Again, I put it on Instagram every day. You're only a mindset away from having a good day. We live in a potential of a mental health epidemic, but ultimately, for me, if you win your morning, you win your day.